reset. So if you just write button, actually it will take by default submit. It will take by default. So default it is submit. That's the reason you don't need to give type as submit. Type as submit. Just button type you have to define. Button you have to define. So technically, this we have to use in future while working with server-side integrations. So how to get the data, how to post the data to server-side technologies, how to manage all this we need to understand. For that we use regularly this submit event. While working with the forms concept in our Angular, we will discuss about that submit event detailedly also. As of now, so technically how to write the submit event. Technically how we write the submit event. Let's see one simple example for that. Actually, so we have a form. We have a form. Div another I will give as class form group. Okay. So here we have a form. We have a form. And inside the form, I just defined name. And I defined text box. Input type is equal to text. And we have a button. And this is submit button. Submit button. Usually what happens is, so this is the name and this is the submit button. On submit, we need to post this form data. How to post the complete form data, you will learn in Angular forms concept while working with the forms. As of now, how to write submit event? How do we write submit event? That means usually if this button is, actually its type by default is submit only. Even you don't give by default, it is submit. You can see this is submit button and another button I given as type as button and the word as submit 2. This is submit 1. Both are ordinary buttons only. Both are looking like buttons. But technically, first one is submit button, second one is not submit button. Because you mentioned the type as button, so it doesn't have the ability to submit the form. And how you identify that form submitted or not? So you have to write submit event for form. Form should use submit event. And we need to write the logic for that. That means public on submit. I will just put an alert saying that form submitted. Just an alert should display form submitted. And I will save this. And on submit, I have to call it on submit of form. We have to call on submit. On submit, we need to define. Remember, this submit event can be used only for form. We should not write for buttons here. Buttons, submit button have by default clickability. When you click, it will submit the form. So it is an event written for form and used with submit button. That means you observe carefully here. I click on submit 1, an alert will come, form submitted. I click on submit 2, it's not working because it is not a submit button. Every button is not a submit button, and only submit buttons have the ability to submit the form. Now, generally, many people ask questions, so many questions will be there. Many people ask like, I have a drop down. On drop down change, I need to submit the form. Drop down change means, for example, they asked when I open a website, first they asked from which city you are. Okay, when you select the city, then page will be submitted and that city related data will load. That means on the change of drop down, I need to submit the form. Is it possible to submit the form on the change of drop down? By default, it is not possible because drop-down uses switch event, change event. And on change event, you cannot submit the form. It is not possible. Then what we have to do, we have to implement a technique. Technique is nothing but on the change of drop-down, call the form submit functionality. If you can call the form submit functionality on the change of drop-down, then the form will be submitted. So that is the technique we need to follow regularly. So the point here is how you can manage, how you can submit, how you can configure and define them. So that is important to understand. So submitting the form, configuring the form, and handling the form. So let's see. Generally, what happens now is this is not working because it is not a submit button. It's not a submit button. On other, so then you can do right like this now. Suppose you have another option. So public call submit. Call submit is another method. Here what I am doing, this dot on submit is a method. We are calling that here. Actually, we can call form submit also, that we will see later in forms concept. And call submit is defined on the click here. On the click is equal to call submit. That means now when you click a non-submit button, that means it is not a submit button. You click that submit 1, it is submitting the form. You click submit 2, that is also submitting the form. But this time, actually you should know that submit 2 is not a submit button, but can it submit the form? It can submit the form by calling the form submit. By default, they don't have the ability. In that case, on every event, you have the ability to submit the form. You can call that and you can use it. That is how we generally manage the submit events. Submit event. Technically, submit event is handled in this way, right? So, but so many questions will be here. Like the question is, can a form have multiple submit buttons? Can a form have multiple submit buttons? What do you say? Can a form have multiple submit buttons? Can a form have multiple submit buttons? Yes, a form can have multiple submit buttons. If your answer is no, that is wrong. A form can have multiple submit buttons. For example, on a page, we can have insert, update, delete. Am I right? On a page, we can have insert, update, delete. Yes or no? Right? Then on insert, it should submit. On delete, it should submit. On update, it should submit. Na? Yes or no? Right? That means you have to submit. You have to submit. And very important is a page can have multiple submit buttons. Now the challenging point is if a page is having multiple submit buttons, so form submit event is only one and page is having multiple submit buttons. Now the question is how to tell this submit button, which submit button clicked, is insert, is update or delete, because all are submit buttons only. For example, see here, suppose I am writing the event like this, button, this is insert, another button that is update, and another button that is delete. All are submit buttons only. All are submit buttons only. Now you can see that all are submit buttons only. Insert, update, delete. I click insert, form submitted. I click update, form submitted. I click delete, form submitted. But on insert, it should do insert functionality. On update, it should do update functionality. On delete, it should do delete functionality. Then how do we identify that? How do we manage that? So that means now I want the submit button to handle different